The first sound on Grandpa's final recording was not his voice. It was 3 sharp warning beeps from somewhere behind him. Beep, beep, beep. Under the polished walnut conference table, Hazel's fingers closed around mine so tightly that her nails pressed crescents into my skin. At the front of the room, my mother stood beside the speaker with one hand resting on my father's shoulder. They had dressed in black, but neither of them looked like they were grieving. They looked prepared. Grandpa's voice filled the boardroom. If I am unable to continue, Beverly and Dennis will assume authority over the company. They understand what must be done. My father lowered his eyes with practiced humility. My mother looked toward the board as if the words had already crowned them. This was recorded shortly before Arthur passed, she said. It was his final instruction. 6 months earlier, those same 2 people had told me my autistic daughter did not belong in their family. They had given me a choice between their house and Hazel. I had chosen my daughter. Now, they wanted everyone in that room to believe Grandpa had chosen them. Hazel rocked once in her chair, then again. Her breathing changed. I reached for the headphones in her bag, but she shook her head. The recording continued, and Grandpa paused in the middle of a sentence, exactly 3 seconds, then said, "No sale should be delayed by sentiment." Hazel turned toward me. Her face had gone completely still. "Mom," she whispered. Every person at the table kept listening to the dead man's voice. Hazel leaned closer until her lips almost touched my sleeve. I've heard those words before. Across the room, my mother's smile disappeared. My father did not look at Hazel. He looked at the speaker. For the first time since the recording began, both of them turned pale. Before I tell you how my daughter recognized the lie everyone else believed, I hope you're doing well. Stay with me to hear what happened next, and please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of our story. 3 weeks before Mark left us, I began keeping lists. I wrote down the nights he came home late, conferences without hotel confirmations, and calls he took in the garage with the door almost closed. I told myself the lists were practical. Hazel did better when our days were predictable, and lately Mark had turned every routine into a question mark. The truth was that I already knew something was wrong. I just wanted enough facts to make the truth hurt less. The message appeared on our family laptop while I was checking Hazel's school portal. A notification slid across the corner of the screen before I could look away. I wish you were still here. Last night wasn't enough. The sender was Lindsay Carter, one of Mark's regional sales coordinators. Mark had told me he was spending 2 nights in Columbus for a management conference. Another message appeared beneath it. Next time, don't book under your real name. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Hazel was at the kitchen table lining up apple slices by size. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace clicked on. Every ordinary sound continued as if my marriage had not just split open 3 feet away from my daughter. I took a photograph of the messages, closed the laptop, and finished packing Hazel's lunch for the next day. That was the part I hated remembering most. I did not scream or throw anything. I cut the crust from her sandwich because that was what still needed doing. Mark came home shortly after 8. He loosened his tie as he entered, glanced toward Hazel, and asked why she was still awake. I told Hazel she could take her tablet upstairs for 20 minutes. She looked from my face to his, sensing the change before either of us said a word. When her bedroom door closed, I placed my phone on the counter with the photographs open. "How long?" I asked. Mark did not pretend confusion. He sat down, pressed both hands against his face, and said Lindsay's name, as though admitting it quietly made the betrayal smaller. "Since September," he said. 4 months. 4 months of school meetings, grocery lists, therapy appointments, and dinners reheated after he claimed a client had kept him late. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I didn't know how. "That usually means no." He looked toward the stairs. "Monica, we haven't been okay for a long time." I expected him to blame work or say we had grown apart. Instead, he began listing all the things our family could not do easily. Restaurants with loud music, flights without preparation, vacations that required sudden changes, dinners where Hazel sometimes needed to leave the table. He never called our daughter broken. What he said was colder, because he made it sound reasonable. Everything revolves around keeping her regulated, he said. Every plan depends on whether she can handle it. I don't know where I fit anymore. You fit where her father is supposed to fit. That isn't fair. No, Mark. Sleeping with someone else and blaming the accommodations your child needs is not fair. He flinched, but he did not take it back. By midnight, a suitcase lay open on our bed. He packed shirts with the careful efficiency of a man preparing for another business trip. Hazel appeared in the doorway, holding the corner of her blue blanket. She looked at the suitcase, then at Mark. "Are you leaving because of the lake?" she asked. The previous summer, a crowded boat dock and an unexpected fireworks display had sent her into a panic. Mark had spent the drive home in silence. I knelt in front of her. "Your dad is leaving because of choices he made. Not because of the lake, and not because of you. But he said plans are hard with me." My chest tightened. I explained again, using more words than she needed, because I was trying to convince both of us. Adults were responsible for honesty. Marriage problems belong to adults. A child needing quiet did not make an adult betray a family. Hazel listened, then asked, "Is he coming back tomorrow?" Mark closed the suitcase. "I don't know. He left before dawn." Within days, his salary began going into an account I could not access. He continued paying the minimum portion of the mortgage his lawyer advised, but groceries, utilities, legal fees, and nearly all of Hazel's daily expenses came from my paycheck and what remained in our joint savings. He had not stolen everything. He had simply stepped away from enough obligations to make the house impossible for me to keep. I spent 2 evenings at the dining table with a calculator and a yellow legal pad. Even after cutting every expense I could, I would fall behind within months. I needed a lawyer's retainer. Hazel needed consistency, insurance, and transportation to appointments. Pride was the only thing I could still afford, and pride would not keep the heat on. My mother answered on the second ring. "You and Hazel can stay in your old room until you get settled," Beverly said. Her voice softened in the way it always did when she believed she was being generous. "You shouldn't be alone right now." My father came onto the line and added, "We'll help, but this house has to stay orderly. Everyone needs to respect that." I heard the condition, but I treated it like a small one. They did not understand Hazel yet, I told myself. Once they saw how hard she tried, they would become more patient. 2 days later, I packed the things Hazel checked first. Her noise-canceling headphones, her weighted blanket, and the small wooden box containing picture cards Grandpa Arthur had made for her years ago. She left expensive toys untouched and counted the cards twice before placing the box in her backpack. At the front door, she looked back at the staircase and asked, "Are we coming home?" I could not promise what I did not know. "We're going somewhere safer while I figure that out." As I backed down the driveway, Mark stood behind the living room window. He watched our car leave, but never opened the door. An hour later, I carried Hazel's suitcase into the bedroom where I had slept as a teenager. The bed was neatly made. My old photographs were gone. Beside the closet sat a large plastic bin filled with Hazel's sensory lamp, fidget tools, visual schedule, and spare headphones. Across the lid, my mother had taped a white label in thick black letters. "Therapy items, basement only." My mother found me staring at the plastic bin. Before I had decided whether to be angry or grateful, she stood in the doorway with a stack of folded towels and followed my eyes to the label. "I put those things together so the room wouldn't feel cluttered," she said. "You know how your father is about order." Hazel crouched beside the bin and lifted the lid. Her fingers moved over the edge of her sensory lamp, then the smooth wooden handle of her weighted lap pad. She did not take anything out. "These are mine," she said. "I know, sweetheart." I turned to my mother. "She needs some of this upstairs." Mother placed the towels on the dresser. "Of course she can use what she needs. I'm only asking that the house not start looking like a therapy center. The words were mild enough to make an argument sound unreasonable. I selected Hazel's lamp, headphones, visual schedule, and 2 fidget tools, then left the rest in the bin. I told myself it was temporary. We would be there for a few months, not forever, and keeping the peace would give me time to find another place. That evening, Mother explained the household rules while Hazel and I ate soup at the kitchen island. Headphones were not allowed at the dinner table because they were rude. Meals were to be eaten together, not carried upstairs. The grandfather clock in the dining room stayed on because it had belonged to Arthur's father. Hazel's belongings could remain in our bedroom, but nothing that looked clinical was to be left in the common rooms. I negotiated for the lamp and a basket beside the couch. Mother allowed both as long as the basket had a lid. When I asked whether Hazel could wear one ear protector during meals, if the room became too loud, Mother shook her head. She has to learn that other people won't always reorganize their lives around her. Hazel looked down at her soup. I should have ended the conversation there, but fear had already started making bargains inside me. We'll try dinner without them, I said. Hazel, you can sit with us for the full meal, right? We need to show Grandma and Grandpa that we appreciate being here. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. How long is a full meal? Maybe 30 minutes. What if it hurts? We'll make a plan. She nodded because she trusted me, not because the answer made sense. Later, while we unpacked, Hazel placed her headphones on the nightstand and arranged the picture cards Grandpa Arthur had made in a straight line across the bed. One showed a table saw. Another showed a dust collector. The smallest card showed a yellow forklift with the number 14 written beneath it. She glanced toward the hallway, then lowered her voice. Why did Grandma ask us to live here? If she doesn't want it to look like I live here. I folded the same sweater twice before answering. She likes things a certain way. That doesn't mean she doesn't want you here. Hazel studied my face long enough to make me wonder which of us I was trying to reassure. The grandfather clock became a problem the next morning. Its ticking carried through the dining room and into the hall, steady and loud in the quiet house. Hazel began matching it under her breath while she ate cereal. Tick, tick, tick. My father lowered his newspaper. Please stop that. Hazel pressed her lips together. 5 seconds later, the clock ticked again, and she whispered the sound with it. Dad folded the paper. That noise is making everyone tense. She's trying to manage the clock, I said. The clock has been here for 60 years. It isn't the one that needs managing. Hazel's shoulders rose toward her ears. I heard myself say, I'm sorry, we'll work on it. She went still. Then she carried her bowl to the sink without finishing breakfast and walked upstairs. The apology had left my mouth from habit, but this time I heard what she had heard. I had not apologized for the loud clock or for Dad's impatience. I had apologized for her. I found her sitting on the bedroom floor, with the forklift card in her hand. I wanted to tell her I had not meant it that way, but explanations had begun to feel like another way of asking her to absorb what adults refused to change. I'm sorry I said that, I told her. You weren't doing anything wrong. The clock was still doing it after I stopped. I know, I said, sitting beside her. The clock was allowed to make noise. You were the one they asked to disappear. At lunch, Grandpa Arthur arrived without warning, carrying a paper bag from the bakery near the factory. He was 88, walked with a cane he disliked, and still wore a Von millwork jacket, even though he only spent a few hours a week at the company. Hazel came downstairs when she heard his voice. Arthur did not ask her for a hug or tell her to look at him. He set a cinnamon roll on a plate and asked whether she wanted the icing warmed. No, she said. Warm icing moves. Then we'll leave it cold. He noticed the forklift card in her hand. You still have number 14? Hazel held it up. It had a broken voice. Arthur smiled. Most old machines do. He asked whether she wanted to visit the factory with him on Sunday morning, before the crews arrived and while the equipment was silent. Hazel looked at me before answering. Mother stepped in from the kitchen. "Arthur, she doesn't need to be wandering around a factory. It's dangerous, and she gets overwhelmed. That is why I said Sunday morning. She has enough to adjust to." Arthur did not argue. He only looked at Hazel and said the invitation would remain open. The card carried me back 4 years, to the first time he had taken us through the finishing area. Hazel had been 7, and terrified by the sudden bursts of compressed air. Arthur had found her a pair of ear protectors, and waited until she chose to keep walking. Near the loading bay, forklift number 14 had reversed, with 3 uneven warning beeps. The first 2 were sharp. The third dragged out as if the machine had run out of breath. Hazel repeated the pattern all the way home. Arthur had told her that when machines grew old, each one developed its own voice. It had been an ordinary kindness, the kind that cost him nothing and meant everything to her. After lunch, an email from my divorce attorney appeared on my phone. Mark wanted a flexible parenting schedule based on his travel. He was willing to see Hazel when he was in town, but he would not commit to weekday pickups, therapy appointments, or a fixed overnight routine. Mother read my face before I lowered the phone. When I told her the basics, she sighed. "Maybe he felt there was never room for him," she said. "You always put Hazel first. She is his child, and you are his wife. Marriage cannot survive if one person is always last." I wanted to ask where a child was supposed to rank when she needed her parents. Instead, I watched Hazel at the other end of the room, turning the forklift card between her fingers. I was afraid that if I raised my voice, Mother would decide our stay had become too disruptive before I had saved enough to leave. "Mark made his own choices," I said. "I'm not discussing this with Hazel in the room." Mother's mouth tightened, but she let the subject drop. That evening, she appeared in our doorway while I was helping Hazel prepare her clothes for school. She said Arthur and 2 senior people from the company were coming for dinner the following night. She wanted the dining room used properly, with the silver and the old clock running. "This matters to your father," she said. "Please make sure Hazel doesn't cause a scene." After she left, I wrote a list for Hazel. "Sit near the end of the table. Keep both feet on the floor. Ask before leaving. Do not repeat the clock. Try not to cover your ears unless necessary." I wrote each rule in careful block letters and added small boxes she could check. Hazel read the list twice. Then she looked up at me, her face more frightened than it had been when Mark carried his suitcase out of our house. "If I do all of it right," she asked, "will they keep us?" I looked at the list in Hazel's hands and wished I could tear it up without frightening her more. "They are not deciding whether to keep us based on how well you eat dinner," I said. She traced the final checkbox with her thumb. "Then why did you make rules?" The honest answer was that I had started believing my mother's version of welcome. I had treated safety as something Hazel could earn by remaining quiet enough, still enough, grateful enough. Instead of admitting that, I told her the list was only meant to help her know what to expect. She folded it carefully and placed it beside her clothes. By late afternoon, freezing rain had begun tapping against the windows. Mother polished the silver while a classical station played through the dining room speakers. The grandfather clock marked every quarter hour with a metallic chime, and Dad had left the television running in the den so he could follow the weather warnings. I asked Mother to turn off the music. "It's barely audible," she said. "The television and clock are audible too." The sounds overlap for Hazel. She placed another fork beside a plate and adjusted it until the handles formed a straight line. The entire house cannot be rearranged for one person. I lowered the music myself. Mother reached past me and raised it again. Arthur called shortly before 6. His driver would not bring him out with ice forming on the roads, and the 2 company guests canceled soon afterward. I expected Mother to simplify dinner, but she lit the candles and opened the dining room anyway. "We have already made the effort," she said. "We might as well eat properly." Hazel came downstairs wearing the soft gray sweater she had chosen the night before. Her headphones remained upstairs because I had promised Mother she would try dinner without them. She sat near the end of the table and found the stitched lines in the white tablecloth. One finger followed a line from her plate to the edge, then returned and began again. Under the table, her other hand pressed against each fingertip in order. Mother served roast chicken from a silver platter. Dad dragged his chair closer, and the wooden legs scraped sharply across the floor. Hazel flinched. I touched her wrist. "You're okay." She looked at me, then at the doorway. It was the signal we had agreed on. If she needed to leave, she would look at me and wait for a nod. I should have given it immediately. Instead, I glanced at my mother. She was watching us over the rim of her wine glass. I imagined the conversation that would follow if Hazel left before the food was served. I imagined Dad saying we had refused to try. I imagined packing our belongings with nowhere else to go. 2 more minutes, I whispered. Hazel returned her eyes to the tablecloth. The television announcer raised his voice as a new weather advisory began. The clock ticked behind me. Mother's fork touched her plate with a bright, repeated click as she cut her chicken. Hazel began pressing her fingertips faster. Dad asked about my attorney, then complained that divorce lawyers created conflict by encouraging women to make demands. Mother answered him while the television continued in the next room. Their voices crossed each other, and the clock chimed once for the half hour. Hazel looked at me again. This time I nodded, but Dad shifted his chair before she could stand. The legs screeched across the hardwood. Mother turned too quickly and knocked a small bread plate from the table. It struck the floor and broke. Hazel clapped both hands over her ears. Her chair tipped backward as she pushed away from the table. "Too loud," she said. "Too loud. Too loud." She backed toward the wall, breathing in short, shallow pulls. I stood between her and the table. "Turn off the television," I said. Dad did not move. "Please turn it off and lower the music." Mother placed her napkin beside her plate. Normal children know how to behave at dinner. Hazel heard her. I felt it in the way my daughter's body folded inward, as though she could make herself smaller than the sentence. "Do not speak about her that way. She is 11 years old, Monica. Throwing herself away from the table because a plate broke is not acceptable. She isn't throwing anything. She is overwhelmed." I moved toward Hazel slowly, keeping my voice low. "We're leaving the room. You don't have to talk." Dad stood, blocking part of the doorway. "Every time she behaves like this, you reward her by letting her escape. I'm getting her somewhere quiet. What she needs is structure from people who know what they're doing," he said. "A specialized residential program would teach her to function instead of teaching everyone else to surrender." Hazel's breathing broke into a small sound. I took her hand. Dad looked directly at me. "She belongs in a facility, not this family." For a moment, no one moved. The clock continued ticking, and the weather report continued describing ice on roads across the county. I led Hazel around him and into the hallway. Mother followed before we reached the stairs. "Your father is speaking badly because he is frustrated. Do not turn this into another crisis." "You both already did that." Hazel pulled toward the front door, but she had no coat or shoes. I guided her upstairs and told her to put on her boots while I opened the suitcase. She sat on the edge of the bed, rocking slightly. "I'm sorry," she said. I packed her medication, 2 changes of clothes, her headphones, the weighted blanket, and Grandpa's wooden cards. "You have nothing to apologize for. I broke dinner." "The plate broke. You didn't." I was loud. "You were hurting." Mother appeared in the bedroom doorway. She had composed her face again, as if she had come to discuss a difficult but reasonable arrangement. "You don't need to leave," she said. "You need rest, Monica. You need time to handle the divorce and get back on your feet." With Hazel, there are excellent programs for children like her. Trained people could give her consistency, and you could stay here while you rebuild your life. I stopped packing. "You want me to live in this house while my daughter lives somewhere else? I want you to think about her future. You cannot build your entire life around preventing discomfort. You are exhausted, your marriage is ending, And you are nearly out of money. At some point, being practical is not cruelty. The suggestion frightened me, because every practical fact she named was true. I was exhausted. I had no lease, no savings large enough to protect us, and no temporary support order. Outside, ice was thickening on the porch rail. None of that made abandoning Hazel practical. It only made it expensive to refuse. I zipped the suitcase and lifted it from the bed. Dad waited at the bottom of the stairs. When he saw our coats, he shook his head. "You might afford a motel for a week," he said. "Then what? Mark's attorney will ask where his daughter is sleeping. Instability matters in custody cases." I tightened Hazel's scarf. "Threatening me with Mark will not make me leave her." Mother glanced through the window. "The roads are freezing. At least let Hazel remain here tonight while you calm down." The words settled between us. She was still offering me shelter, but only if I accepted that my daughter could be separated from me whenever her needs became inconvenient. I opened the door. Freezing rain struck my face and collected on the windshield while I loaded the suitcase. Hazel climbed into the passenger seat and held her headphones against her ears before I had even started the engine. I drove slowly. The tires slipped once at the end of the street, but I corrected without leaving the lane. I kept both hands on the wheel and told Hazel where we were going, even though I did not yet know. The first motel had no vacancies. Families stranded by the storm filled the lobby, and a handwritten sign on the desk said every room was taken. The second place had one room listed online, but it was gone by the time we arrived. Hazel began apologizing again as I returned to the car. "This is not your fault," I told her. "The weather is not your fault. The rooms being full are not your fault. What Grandma and Grandpa said is not your fault." The third motel stood beside the interstate, its yellow sign blurred by freezing rain. They had one room left. The price for 3 nights took nearly everything I had set aside for groceries and legal fees, but the clerk gave me a key. As I filled out the registration card, Hazel stood beside the suitcase with her blanket pressed to her chest. "Mom," she said, "did I make you lose our house?" I put down the pen and took both of her hands. "You didn't make me lose a home," I said. "They only showed me that place was never really our home." My phone vibrated against the counter. A message from Mother filled the screen. "When you are ready to be reasonable, come home alone." I deleted my mother's message without answering, but her last 2 words followed me into the motel room. "Come home alone." The freezing rain stopped before sunrise, leaving a clear shell over the parking lot. Water dripped from our coats onto the carpet, and the heater beneath the window roared every few minutes before shutting off with a metallic bang. Hazel slept in her clothes with her headphones on, and the weighted blanket pulled to her chin. I did not sleep. I kept thinking about my father's warning that Mark could use our instability against me. By 6, I had opened my work calendar, my bank account, and the list of rentals I had saved months earlier, but never believed I would need. The ice began melting after 2 days. Our clothes dried over the backs of chairs, but the motel never felt temporary to Hazel. Every time I moved the suitcase, she watched my hands. My supervisor allowed me to work from the room for 2 weeks, as long as I joined every meeting and kept up with purchase orders. I worked at the small table while Hazel attended school, then searched for apartments until the listings blurred together. A coworker named Paula sent me the address of a unit above a small appliance repair shop. She did not offer money or promise it would solve anything. She only wrote that the landlord was quiet, fair, and more interested in steady rent than a perfect credit score. The apartment had 1 bedroom, sloped ceilings, and a kitchen table barely wide enough for 2 plates. The stairs smelled faintly of machine oil from the shop below. The landlord warned me that the delivery door opened at 8 each morning, but evenings were quiet, and the bedroom faced an alley instead of the street. Hazel stood in the center of the empty room and listened. "No clock," she said. "No clock. Can Grandma come take me from here? No one can make you leave because you need quiet." She nodded, but she kept her suitcase zipped after we moved in. Her clothes stayed folded inside it for the first week, as if putting them in drawers might tempt the room to reject us. My divorce attorney filed for temporary child support, continued health insurance for Hazel, and shared payment of her uncovered therapy and medical costs. She also requested temporary spousal support, though she warned me not to build my budget around it. A few weeks later, the magistrate ordered Mark to pay guideline child support, keep Hazel on his insurance, and divide the uncovered expenses with me. The request for spousal support was left open until the court had a clearer picture of our income and the house. The order did not replace what Mark had stopped paying, and it did not return the money I had spent on the motel or the apartment deposit. It did mean I could buy groceries without calculating which therapy bill would have to wait. The first evening the payment appeared, I took Hazel to a small diner near our building. The hostess started leading us toward a table beside the kitchen, where dishes struck metal racks and servers called orders through the service window. "Could we sit somewhere quieter?" I asked. The question came out without an apology attached to it. The hostess pointed to a booth near the front window. "That one work?" Hazel looked at me, surprised, then slid into the booth. She kept her headphones beside her plate. Our new table at home was smaller than the one in my parents' dining room. One leg wobbled until I folded a piece of cardboard beneath it. Hazel helped me choose a lamp with a dimmer, and we kept the overhead light off during dinner. She still did not unpack. One night, I placed her empty dresser drawers on the floor so she could see them. "This apartment isn't a test," I said. "You don't have to behave a certain way to stay. What if the man downstairs says I'm too loud? Then we talk about the noise. We do not talk about getting rid of you." She carried 3 shirts from the suitcase to the drawer. It was not everything, but it was a beginning. Grandpa Arthur called the following Sunday. He did not begin by defending my mother or asking me to forgive anyone. He asked whether Hazel was safe. "Yes," I said. "We have an apartment." "And is she with you?" The question told me how Beverly had described the situation. "Of course she is." Arthur exhaled slowly. "Your mother said you left in the middle of an argument and refused help. She offered help if I sent Hazel away." He was quiet long enough that I checked the phone screen to make sure the call had not dropped. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have known what was happening in that house. You couldn't have stopped me from leaving." "No, but I might have stopped them from believing they had the right to ask." His voice sounded thinner than it had at lunch, but his mind was clear. He said he was reviewing decisions at the company and needed to correct something before it became permanent. "When I clean this up, I want to see you," he said. I did not ask what he meant. Von Millwork had always belonged to a part of the family where every conversation became a contest over loyalty. I had just escaped one set of conditions. I did not want another. "Hazel misses you," I said instead. She was sitting beside me, listening without pretending not to. I put the call on speaker. "Do you still have the card for forklift 14? She asked. Arthur gave a soft laugh. "I believe it is in the top drawer of my desk. It had the broken beeper." "I remember." Hazel looked relieved that someone else remembered it too. Arthur promised to call again after he finished what he was working on. He never did. Several weeks later, I received an email from my mother with the subject line "Arthur Von Funeral Information." There was no greeting. The message listed the church, the burial time, and the request that family arrive 30 minutes early. I read it twice before telling Hazel that Grandpa Arthur had suffered a stroke and died. She sat at our small table with both hands around a glass of water. Was he alone? No, he was at the hospital. Did he know people were there? I don't know. She stared at the cardboard beneath the table leg. "I want to say goodbye. I don't want to go to Grandma's house." "We won't." The funeral was held on a humid June morning. Hazel wore her headphones around her neck and sat beside me near the back of the church. My parents occupied the front pew beneath a spray of white lilies. Mother turned once, saw us, and faced forward again. We stayed through the final hymn. When people began forming a receiving line, Hazel touched my sleeve. "Can we go now?" "Yes." That single word felt different from the answer I had withheld at my parents' dinner table. I did not look toward my mother for permission. I took Hazel's hand and led her toward the side exit. A woman in a navy suit caught up with us beneath the church awning. I recognized Nora Whitcomb from company Christmas dinners years earlier. She had been one of Arthur's corporate attorneys, though she introduced herself now as counsel advising the board's independent process. "I'm sorry to stop you here," she said, "but the directors are meeting about temporary management. Your parents say Arthur left a final recording. I have nothing to do with the company. Arthur's signed succession letter says you must receive notice of any leadership vote." Rainwater from the awning struck the pavement between us. Hazel moved closer to my side. I asked why a recording mattered if Arthur had already signed instructions. Nora glanced toward the church doors before answering. "The recording cannot appoint them, but if enough directors believe it was Arthur's final recommendation, the board can. His signed succession letter recommends someone else." I told Nora I had no intention of fighting for a company I had left years ago. She did not argue. She only explained that Grandpa's signed letter named an outside executive as his preferred temporary replacement and required me to receive notice before the board voted on leadership. My parents claimed he had changed his mind shortly before his death. According to them, the proof was in a recording no one outside their control had heard. "You are not being asked to run the company," Nora said. "You are being asked to witness what the board is being told." I agreed to attend because refusing would not make the conflict disappear. It would only leave my parents alone in the room to define Grandpa's wishes. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday, at Von Millworks' administrative building. Hazel's usual sitter was away, and the only person available on short notice had never met her. When I suggested Hazel stay home with someone new, she shook her head. "I want to hear Grandpa." I explained that the meeting could be long and that people might argue. She said she could sit near the door and use her headphones if she needed them. For once, I did not make her request sound smaller, so other people would find it easier to accept. We arrived early. I chose 2 chairs near the exit and placed Hazel's headphones, water bottle, and folded visual schedule on the table. An older director glanced at the headphones, but I did not explain them. Hazel was there because Grandpa had included me in the succession process, and because she wanted to hear his voice. That was enough. The boardroom had changed little since I was a teenager. The walnut table still reflected the ceiling lights, and the framed photograph of Grandpa standing beside the first Vaughn delivery truck still hung near the windows. Beyond the glass walls, employees moved through the accounting department with their voices lowered. My parents entered together. Mother wore black and carried a leather folder against her chest. Dad walked beside her with one hand resting near her elbow, as if they had arrived to support each other through grief rather than request control of a company. Mother stopped when she saw Hazel. "I didn't realize this would include children," she said. Hazel wanted to hear Grandpa's message. "This is a corporate meeting." Nora looked up from her papers. "Miss Reed is entitled to attend, and her daughter may remain with her as long as the meeting can proceed." Mother gave Hazel a thin smile. "Of course." Dad did not greet either of us. When the directors had taken their seats, Nora began by explaining the limits of the meeting. Grandpa's death had left the office of president vacant. The board had the authority to appoint temporary officers and define their signing power. No recording could appoint anyone by itself. Dad leaned forward. "No one is claiming otherwise." Mother opened her folder. Arthur recorded his final recommendation after signing the earlier succession letter. He knew circumstances had changed. The proposal they circulated asked the board to appoint them acting co-presidents until a permanent succession plan could be approved. It included authority to manage payroll, vendor contracts, daily operations, and the pending sale of North Plant. One director frowned at the last item. "The succession letter recommends an independent interim chief operating officer." That was before Arthur understood how quickly the North Plant buyer might walk away, Dad said. "The company cannot function indefinitely without someone empowered to sign." Another director agreed that payroll and supplier obligations could not wait for a long search. A woman from the audit committee asked why an interim appointment needed authority to complete a major property sale. Mother rested both hands on the table. Because Arthur did not want sentiment to prevent necessary decisions. Nora looked toward the small speaker Mother had placed beside her folder. Before the board considers any resolution, she said, we will hear the recording exactly as it was provided. Mother pressed play. The first sound was not Grandpa's voice. 3 warning beeps came through the speaker from somewhere behind him. The first 2 were short. The third stretched longer before fading into the low rumble of machinery. Hazel's fingers closed around mine beneath the table. Then Grandpa spoke. If I am unable to continue, Beverly and Dennis will assume authority over the company. They understand what must be done. His voice sounded tired but recognizable. Mother looked around the table as though the question had already been settled. This was recorded shortly before Arthur passed, she said. It was his final instruction. Nora motioned for her to let the file continue. Grandpa's voice returned after a pause. The company cannot remain frozen, while others debate what I have already decided. There was a faint click, then another stretch of background noise. No sale should be delayed by sentiment. Dad lowered his eyes, before looking toward the directors. North Plant has been draining resources for years, he said. Arthur understood that keeping it out of nostalgia would endanger the rest of the business. He wanted us to move forward. A director near the far end asked whether the buyer's deadline could be extended. Dad shook his head. Not without risking the deal. Hazel shifted in her chair. Once, then again. Her breathing became shallower, and her eyes remained fixed on the speaker. I reached toward the bag at my feet. Do you want your headphones? She shook her head. The directors continued discussing whether a limited appointment could be separated from the property authority. Mother answered that splitting responsibility would create paralysis. Dad said the company needed people who knew its operations, not an outsider learning on the job. Hazel's grip tightened. Then she turned toward me. Her face had gone completely still. Mom, she whispered. I leaned closer. I've heard those words before. Across the table, Mother's smile disappeared. Dad did not look at Hazel. He looked at the speaker. Both of them went pale. I kept my voice low. Where did you hear them? Hazel's eyes moved toward the floor as she searched for the answer. At the factory, she said. The broken beeper. The 3 uneven warning sounds replayed in my memory. Forklift number 14. 2 sharp beeps and one that dragged behind them like a failing breath. I did not yet understand how a machine removed years earlier could be heard behind a recording supposedly made shortly before Grandpa died. I only knew Hazel had recognized something specific before I had mentioned the forklift. Mother closed the leather folder. She is grieving, she said. Arthur took her through the factory several times. She is mixing memories. Hazel's shoulders tightened. I stood before I had decided to. Nora, I want the vote delayed until the recording source can be verified. Dad leaned back in his chair. On the basis of an 11-year-old remembering a noise? On the basis of a detail that can be checked. Mother looked at the directors. This is a family grievance being dragged into corporate business. Dad's expression hardened. Monica has been angry with us since she left our home. Now she is using her daughter's condition to disrupt a legitimate transition. A month earlier, I would have begun explaining sensory memory, pattern recognition, and why Hazel's statement deserved to be taken seriously. I would have tried to make every person in the room comfortable enough to believe her. I did not explain any of it. My daughter identified a particular machine sound, I said. Either that sound could have been present when this was recorded, or it could not. You do not need to understand Hazel to verify a maintenance record. The woman from the audit committee turned to Nora. Can the board secure the original file? Nora nodded. The source device, the original digital file, all copies, and every related version should be preserved immediately. Until that is done, I recommend no vote on officer appointments and no authorization connected to North Plant. Dad objected that the company could not remain leaderless. Nora proposed a narrow emergency resolution, allowing the controller and operations managers to handle payroll and ordinary vendor payments without granting either of my parents authority over the property transaction. The directors approved that limited measure. The larger vote was postponed. No one had proved Hazel right. No one had proved my parents wrong. The company remained in the hands of its existing managers, while Nora arranged for the recording to be examined. When the meeting ended, Hazel put on her headphones and waited beside the door while I gathered our things. Mother approached me after the last director stepped into the hallway. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "You have no idea what you just put at risk." I met her eyes. "Then you should be able to prove when that recording was made." Nora called the next morning while I was driving Hazel to school. She had copied the recording, sealed the original device in the company safe, and sent a forensic copy to an audio specialist named Daniel Ortiz. She said the board's limited operating resolution would remain in place until he issued an initial opinion. "How long?" I asked. "A few days, perhaps longer, if he needs the original source material." Hazel watched me from the passenger seat. She could not hear Nora's words, but she recognized the answer in my face. When I ended the call, she asked, "Are they checking the broken beeper?" "They're checking the whole recording. What if they don't hear it?" "Then we tell them exactly what you heard." The waiting gave my parents room to shape the story. By that afternoon, my aunt had sent a message asking why I was using Arthur's death to punish my mother. A cousin I had not spoken to in 2 years wrote that autistic children often combined memories when they were upset. Mother had apparently told everyone that Hazel had visited the factory many times and could have confused one machine with another. She left out the part where she and Dad had turned pale before Hazel explained what she recognized. At the company, Dad pressed the directors to resume the vote. The North Plant buyer had imposed a deadline, and he argued that every day of delay placed the deal in danger. Nora forwarded me his formal request because Grandpa's succession letter required that I receive notice. I read the email twice, then closed it. The language was calm, professional, and urgent. Nothing in it sounded like the man who had told me my daughter belonged in a facility. That was how Dad preferred to cause harm. He removed the cruelty from the page and called what remained good judgment. 3 days later, Nora asked me to join a video call with Daniel Ortiz. He had a quiet voice and did not explain the software he had used. He simply told us what he could support. "The speaker is Arthur Vaughn," he said. "I found no indication of synthetic speech, impersonation, or a voice generated by artificial intelligence." My stomach tightened. Daniel continued before I could respond. "That does not confirm when the recording was made, and it does not confirm that the file represents the full conversation. I can see signs that it may have been exported from another source, but without a longer version or the original recording history, I cannot say what was removed or whether any edit was improper." The voice was real. For several seconds, that single fact seemed to swallow every other qualification. Grandpa had said the words. My parents had not hired someone to imitate him. They had not manufactured his voice on a computer. Nora reminded me that authenticity of voice did not establish date, purpose, or legal authority. I understood her, but I also understood how my parents would use the result. Mother called less than an hour later. "The expert confirmed what we told everyone," she said. "He confirmed Grandpa's voice." "What else is there to confirm? When he said it, why he said it, whether you played the full recording." Her silence was brief. "Do you hear yourself? Your grandfather is dead, and you are accusing his daughter of manipulating his last words because Hazel remembered a noise." I asked for verification. "That is not the same as making an accusation. You embarrassed us in front of the board. You damaged the family's reputation at the worst possible time." I looked across our apartment. Hazel had come home from school and was placing groceries in the cabinet by category. I had not realized my phone volume was high enough for her to hear Mother's voice. She set down a can of soup. "Was I wrong?" she asked after I ended the call. I sat beside her at the small table. "You said you recognized in sound. That is true whether the recording proves anything else or not. But the voice was Grandpa. Yes. So I was wrong. Recognizing something is not the same as proving what happened. You noticed a detail. The adults checking the recording have to do the rest. She pressed her palms against the edge of the table. Maybe I heard a different machine. Maybe. That is why we check things, instead of pretending we already know. Her shoulders lowered slightly, but she did not look convinced. The next day, Mother asked me to meet her and Dad without Hazel. She chose a private room at a cafe near the company offices. When I arrived, 2 cups of coffee were waiting, along with a folder placed precisely in front of the empty chair. Dad slid it toward me. Inside was a proposed agreement. My parents would pay 1 year of rent on our apartment, contribute toward my divorce attorney, establish an education fund for Hazel, and offer me an administrative position at Von Millwork with benefits. For a few seconds, I could not stop calculating what it would mean. 12 months without wondering whether the rent would clear. A lawyer I could afford to call without watching the clock. A fund that might help Hazel long after I was gone. Mother watched me reading. "This is not a bribe," she said. "It is a way to repair what happened." The final page required me to state that Hazel had confused the factory sound with an unrelated memory. I would also acknowledge that I had no objection to my parents serving as temporary co-presidents while the board finalized a permanent succession plan. "You want me to withdraw the question before anyone answers it?" Dad folded his hands. The expert already answered it. "No." He said the voice was real. "And the rest is speculation." I looked again at the promise of rent, legal fees, school money, and a job. The offer was built from every fear they knew I carried. Dad leaned closer. "A custody judge will look at stability. Mark has a house, a salary, and family resources. You have a small apartment over a repair shop, and a budget that depends on a temporary order." The threat was polished, but it was still a threat. Mother reached across the table, as if she intended to take my hand. I moved mine before she could touch it. "This is a chance to come home," she said. "Not necessarily to our house, to the family. We can stop hurting each other." The choice was different only in appearance. At their dining table, they had offered me shelter if I left Hazel behind. Now they were offering money if I abandoned what Hazel had heard. I closed the folder. "You do not get to buy back the words you threw at her." Mother's face tightened. Dad pushed his chair away from the table. "You are choosing conflict," he said. "No. I am choosing not to teach my daughter that her voice disappears whenever someone offers enough money." I left the folder between them. That evening, I sat with Hazel on the bedroom floor and placed Grandpa's wooden picture cards between us. I asked her to describe the sound again, without trying to explain what it meant. She tapped the floor twice, quickly, then held the third tap longer. "Beep, beep, beep," she said. "The last one was sick." "Did you hear it more than once?" "At the factory with Grandpa. It did it every time it moved backward." We searched through the cards. The yellow forklift was there, but the drawing showed only its side. Hazel opened the wooden box and lifted the thin paper lining at the bottom. A photograph had been tucked beneath it. Grandpa stood inside the loading bay, with one hand resting on Hazel's shoulder. She wore oversized ear protectors and held the forklift cart against her coat. Behind them sat the yellow machine with the number 14 painted near the wheel. In the lower corner, a date had been printed in faded orange numbers. October 2022. The forklift in Grandpa's supposed final recording had been there 4 years earlier, not during the last weeks of his life. I sent Nora the photograph before I could talk myself out of it. I included the printed date, the number painted on the forklift, and Hazel's description of the warning sound. I did not claim the picture proved my parents had altered anything. I only asked whether the company still had maintenance records for machine 14. Nora replied, within an hour. "Do not search company systems yourself. I will request the inventory archive." The warning was unnecessary, but I understood why she gave it. My parents were already telling people I had turned grief into a campaign against them. If I accessed a file I was not entitled to see, they would make my conduct the story instead of the recording. 2 days later, Nora called while I was folding laundry at our kitchen table. The forklift was removed from service in April 2023, she said. I looked toward Hazel's bedroom. Her door was open, and I could hear her sorting pencils into a wooden box. Why? The reverse warning system kept failing. I'm sending the repair log to Daniel. The log contained only a few lines that mattered. Forklift 14 produced 2 normal warning tones followed by a prolonged third tone. Technicians had repaired it twice before the company decided replacement was safer than another temporary fix. Beep, beep, beep. Hazel had repeated the pattern exactly. The record did not prove that my parents had cut Grandpa's words. It did prove the sound could not have been recorded in the last weeks of his life. The machine had not existed at Von Millwork for more than 3 years. Daniel examined the background again with the maintenance description in front of him. He told Nora and me that the warning tones sounded like part of the same environment as Grandpa's voice. The echo, machinery hum, and distance remained consistent. In ordinary language, I said, someone probably didn't add the beeps later. That would be my current opinion, he said. The recording appears to have been made while that forklift was operating nearby. The question had changed. We no longer needed to ask whether the voice belonged to Grandpa. We needed to ask why my parents had called an old recording his final instruction. Nora sent me a transcript of the file they had provided. I read it that evening while Hazel completed a worksheet beside me. Most of the words matched what we had heard in the boardroom, but one line caught my attention. Grandpa referred to a section of the factory as the finishing annex. I had not worked at Von Millwork in years, but I remembered the name because Grandpa had used it throughout my childhood. The company renamed that section the North Finishing Center after a renovation 2 years earlier. Employees had new maps, new signs, and new safety labels. Grandpa sometimes resisted new language, but even he had begun using the updated name during company events. I called Nora. The forklift is not the only old thing in the recording. She asked me to explain. He called the finishing department the annex. That name was replaced before he died. Nora was quiet for a moment. That gives me another date marker. She requested the company's stored communications from the period surrounding Grandpa's heart surgery 4 years earlier. The request covered emergency plans, leadership documents, insurance materials, and any recordings made in case he could not return to work. My father responded before the archive search was complete. He sent the board a written explanation, saying Grandpa could have reused an older background clip while recording a new message. He also suggested that Grandpa might have played part of an earlier recording before stating his final wishes. The explanation created possibilities without proving any of them. It was enough to prevent the directors from dismissing my parents' request completely. The board kept the broader appointment suspended, but it did not withdraw the proposal. My parents still had a path to temporary control. If they could persuade enough directors that the age of the background sound did not change Grandpa's final intention. Dad called me that night. "You have proven there was an old machine in the audio," he said. "You have not proven Arthur did not repeat the same decision later. Then provide the complete original file." We provided what he left for the board. "That wasn't my question." His voice hardened. "This company employs hundreds of people. You are treating a continuity problem like a family puzzle. You are the one asking for authority based on that recording." He ended the call without answering. The following morning, a short article appeared on the website of a local business paper. Someone had told the reporter that the company's leadership vote had been delayed after an autistic child recognized a discontinued factory alarm in Arthur Vaughn's final recording. The headline called Hazel's hearing extraordinary. By lunchtime, 2 relatives had shared the article. My aunt wrote that Hazel had always possessed a rare family gift. A cousin who had recently questioned her memory now described her as brilliant. Mother called before I finished reading the comments. "This attention could be handled positively," she said. "The company should acknowledge Hazel before someone else controls the story." There should not be a story about her. She helped identify an important detail. We should be proud. I heard the word we and felt something inside me turn cold. A month earlier, my mother had wanted every visible sign of Hazel confined to a basement. Now she wanted the family name wrapped around the same trait she had treated as a problem. That afternoon, Mother sent me a photograph. It showed Grandpa beside Hazel during the old factory visit. Hazel wore ear protection and held the forklift card close to her chest. The image was warmer than the one I had found because Grandpa was leaning toward her, listening while she pointed at something outside the frame. Mother's message appeared beneath it. We could use this in a company statement. It would show Arthur always encouraged her special abilities. People should know our family supported her. I replied that neither Hazel's name nor image could be used in any announcement. Mother called immediately. You cannot erase her from something she helped uncover. I am protecting her from people who want to turn her into an advertisement. No one is exploiting her. We are giving her credit. You told me she did not belong in your family. That was said during an impossible evening. You suggested I place her in a facility. And now you are refusing to let anyone recognize how remarkable she is. The contradiction did not trouble her. In Mother's mind, rejecting Hazel when she was inconvenient and praising her when she became useful were not opposites. Both placed Mother in charge of deciding what Hazel was worth. I ended the call. Hazel had been standing in the hallway. She did not ask whether Mother had called. She had heard enough to know. Grandma wants my picture? She asked. Yes. But she wanted me to go away. I placed my phone face down on the table. She wants people to know you heard something important. Why now? I could have said Mother had changed. I could have said families became confused when they were afraid. Those were comforting answers, but they were not honest. I'm still trying to understand that, I said. Hazel sat across from me and touched the cardboard beneath the uneven table leg with the toe of her shoe. I only heard the beeper. I know. I didn't make Grandpa say anything. I know that too. That night, Nora's team searched the archived files from the year of Grandpa's surgery. Most had been moved from the main company server into long-term storage after the old system was replaced. Near 11, my phone rang. Nora did not begin with a greeting. We found a continuity folder, she said. It was moved to cold storage with the insurance records. I sat upright in bed. Was the recording there? Not the full file. One numbered item is missing. The familiar disappointment settled over me, but Nora continued. The transcript index is intact. It shows that a longer recording existed. I looked toward Hazel, asleep beneath her weighted blanket. Nora lowered her voice. We found the index. Your grandfather did record a continuity message 4 years ago. She paused before adding the part that changed the shape of everything we knew. Your parents were in the room. The continuity folder did not contain one clean recording. It held an index, several damaged audio fragments, and a list of files that had once been stored together before the company changed servers. Nora asked me to come to her office the next morning. Daniel joined us by video, his screen filled with file names and dates I did not understand. He did not waste time explaining the software. He played what he had recovered. Grandpa's voice came through in short, uneven sections. This statement is being recorded before my cardiac procedure. A burst of static swallowed the next few words. Then Grandpa spoke again. If I am unable to resume my duties, Beverly and Dennis may maintain daily operations for no more than 90 days. The audio cut off. I leaned toward the speaker. Play that again. Daniel replayed it. The same words ended at the same place. No more than 90 days. My parents had asked the board to appoint them until a permanent succession plan was completed. They had also requested enough signing authority to finish the North Plant sale. Grandpa's actual recording, at least the part we could hear, described something narrower and temporary. What came after that sentence? I asked. We do not have that section yet, Daniel said. The file fragment ends there. Nora placed the transcript index beside me. It showed a longer recording with multiple sections, but several pages and one numbered audio file were missing from the company archive. Daniel had confirmed one other point. The segment my parents played in the boardroom came from the middle of that older recording. It had not been created as a separate final message. Nora closed the folder. This does not transfer shares, appoint officers, or override the board. The problem is that your parents presented part of an old continuity plan as Arthur's final recommendation. They used it to influence a governance vote. Then the vote is over. Not necessarily. She turned her laptop toward me. Dad had submitted a demand for another emergency meeting within 48 hours. He argued that the North Plant buyer would withdraw unless the board approved the sale immediately. He still claimed Grandpa had repeated the same wishes before his death, even if the background recording was older. Why does this sale have to happen before the full recording is found? I asked. Nora opened another document. It was a conflict disclosure form connected to the buyer. One signature line was blank. Near the bottom, under Outside Consultants, was the name Vaughn Strategic Consulting LLC. I knew the company. Dad had created it years earlier for occasional operations work after he talked about reducing his hours at Vaughn Millwork. As far as I knew, it had never done anything significant. What does his consulting company have to do with North Plant? Nora pointed to a payment clause attached to the closing documents. Vaughn Strategic Consulting would receive a fee once the property sale was completed. The number was large enough to explain Dad's urgency, without requiring a complicated trail of hidden accounts. He would be paid if the transaction closed. If the board appointed him and Mother with authority over the sale, he could help approve a deal that rewarded his own company. Did Grandpa know? We cannot prove what Arthur knew yet, Nora said. But his signed succession letter called for an independent audit before any major property transaction. That suggests he had concerns. Until that moment, I had thought the recording was mainly about control. My parents wanted the titles, the office, and the right to say Grandpa had chosen them. Now I understood that control was the tool. They needed it to complete a deal before anyone examined who would profit. Mother called while I was still in Nora's office. I put the phone on speaker after telling her Nora was present. You have seen Dennis's disclosure, she said. The unsigned one. The missing signature is an administrative oversight. Dad's private company gets paid when North Plant is sold. He spent months restructuring that transaction. Consultants are paid for their work. Consultants usually disclose that work before asking for authority to approve the same deal. Mother's voice sharpened. Your father is not stealing from the company. He is being compensated for saving it from an obsolete property. Arthur refused to let go. Then why use an old recording and call it Grandpa's last instruction? You heard Arthur's voice. I also heard him say 90 days. The silence that followed was the clearest answer she had given me. Mother recovered quickly. She said the fragment might have been an early draft. She said Grandpa had changed his mind many times. She said the company could not be paralyzed because a damaged archive produced one incomplete sentence. Every explanation asked me to ignore the same thing. My parents had known exactly when that recording was made because they had been in the room. After school, I found Mother waiting near the edge of the parking lot. Hazel came through the doors with her backpack pulled high on both shoulders. She saw Beverly before I could redirect her toward the car. Mother held a gift bag printed with musical notes. I wanted to give Hazel something, she said. You cannot approach her here without asking me. I am her grandmother. That did not matter to you when you wanted her sent away. Hazel stopped beside me. Mother softened her expression and held out the bag. This is for our little sound detective. Hazel did not take it. I'm not a detective, she said. I remembered a broken machine. Mother smiled, as if Hazel had said something charming. That memory may have saved the whole company. Hazel moved closer to my arm. I stepped between them. Do not turn her into a mascot for Vaughn Millwork. I am trying to celebrate her. You are trying to attach yourself to what she noticed. Mother lowered the bag. You are taking away her chance to know that her family is proud of her. Hazel did not need to expose a lie before she deserved your pride. A few parents passed behind us, guiding children toward waiting cars. Mother glanced at them before lowering her voice. You are teaching her to reject everyone who makes a mistake. No, I am teaching her that love does not appear only when she becomes useful. Hazel tugged gently at my sleeve. She wanted to leave. I opened the passenger door and let her climb inside. Mother remained beside the car, with the gift bag hanging from one hand. As I walked around to the driver's side, she said, "If you stop this sale, hundreds of people could blame you." I turned back. If the sale is honest, the full truth will not stop it. At home, Hazel placed her headphones on the table and asked whether Grandma had bought the gift because of the beeper. Yes. Would she have bought it before? I did not answer for Mother. I told Hazel the only thing I could prove. You never needed that gift to matter. My phone rang before dinner. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. He sounded different from the careful man who had refused to say more than the evidence allowed. The insurance carrier required Arthur's continuity documentation before approving coverage around his surgery, he said. Their archive kept an external copy. I gripped the edge of the table. Is it another fragment? No. Hazel watched my face from across the room. Daniel continued. The copy is complete, and the sentence after the one your parents played changes everything. The emergency meeting took place in the same boardroom where Hazel had first recognized the broken warning beeper, but nothing in the room felt the same. My parents still sat at the front beside the speaker. They still had folders arranged in front of them and a proposed North Plant sale waiting for approval. This time, however, the directors were not looking at them as Arthur's grieving daughter and trusted operations chief. They were looking at two people who had presented an old recording as something new. Hazel chose to sit in the small adjoining conference room with the connecting door open. She could see me from her chair, and I could see her headphones resting over her ears. Nora had made it clear that Hazel would not be questioned, asked to perform, or required to explain what she remembered. Daniel Ortiz joined us by video. On the table in front of Nora sat the insurance company's archived copy of Grandpa's recording, along with a written confirmation of when it had been received. Before anyone pressed play, Nora addressed the board. The recording has never had the authority to appoint officers, transfer ownership, or override the company's regulations, she said. The issue before this board is whether Beverly and Dennis Vaughn misrepresented its date and context in an effort to obtain an interim resolution granting them control. Dad shifted in his chair. No resolution was passed. That is correct, Nora said. The vote was suspended before authority changed hands. That does not eliminate the board's responsibility to examine the information used to request that authority. Mother glanced toward Hazel's room, then back at the directors. Arthur made several recordings over the years. One older draft does not prove he changed his final wishes. Daniel appeared on the screen behind Nora. The complete file came from an independent insurance archive, he said. It was submitted in October 2022 as part of continuity documentation before Arthur Vaughn's cardiac procedure. The file provided to this board was created from sections of that longer recording. Mother's hands tightened around her pen. Nora pressed play. The 3 warning beeps sounded first. Hazel looked toward me from the adjoining room, but did not remove her headphones. Grandpa's voice followed. This statement is being recorded before my cardiac procedure. If I am unable to resume my duties, Beverly and Dennis may maintain daily operations for no more than 90 days. The recording continued beyond the point where the recovered fragment had ended. They may authorize payroll, routine vendor payments, and necessary production expenses. They are not authorized to sell real property, close a plant, or enter any transaction that creates a personal benefit without review by the board and outside counsel. No one interrupted. Then Grandpa said the sentence my parents had removed completely. No sale of North Plant is to proceed until the audit is complete. The woman from the audit committee lowered her eyes to the papers in front of her. One of the directors who had previously supported my parents leaned back slowly. Grandpa continued discussing equipment that had become unsafe or too expensive to repair. His voice grew more impatient as he described managers keeping damaged machines because they had been part of the factory for decades. No sale should be delayed by sentiment, he said. This time, the sentence did not refer to North Plant. It referred to obsolete saws, damaged lifts, and factory equipment that needed to be sold or replaced. My parents had taken Grandpa's warning not to keep broken machinery out of nostalgia and placed it beside their proposal to sell an entire factory property. Every word was his. The meaning they had built from those words was not. When the file ended, the room remained silent. Dad was the first to speak. Arthur's position on North Plant was inconsistent. He knew the property was draining resources. Nora looked at him. Did you know the segment presented at the first meeting came from this continuity recording? Dad hesitated. Mother answered for him. We knew it reflected Arthur's thinking. That was not my question. Dad placed both palms on the table. We clarified what Arthur meant. The full recording contained outdated restrictions made before he understood the final terms of the sale. The words seemed to remain in the air after he stopped speaking. He had not denied changing the context. He had justified it. Nora opened the next folder. This is the conflict disclosure associated with Lakefront Redevelopment Partners. It identifies Vaughan Strategic Consulting as entitled to a fee when the North Plant transaction closes. Dad's expression hardened. That company performed legitimate advisory work. It is your company, one director said. Yes. And you requested signing authority over the transaction that would trigger its payment? The arrangement was disclosed. Nora turned the unsigned form toward the board. It was prepared. It was not completed, approved, or included in the packet initially provided to the directors. Mother spoke quickly. Dennis spent months saving a transaction Arthur kept delaying. The fee is not evidence of theft. No one here has made a criminal determination, Nora said. The board is deciding whether either of you can continue participating in this transaction while an independent audit examines the conflict. There were no police waiting outside. No one reached for handcuffs. The consequences arrived through votes, signatures, and people who had stopped accepting my parents' version of events. The directors formally withdrew the proposed appointment of Beverly and Dennis as acting co-presidents. They suspended both of their signing authority, removed them from all discussions involving North Plant, and authorized an independent audit of the proposed sale and Vaughan Strategic Consulting. The transaction with Lakefront was placed on hold. An interim chief operating officer, independent of our family, would oversee ordinary business while the review continued. Through the glass wall, several employees had gathered near the accounting department. News of the vote moved quickly. One woman covered her mouth when someone told her the North Plant sale had been stopped. A man in a work jacket closed his eyes and gripped the back of a chair. The company had not been permanently saved. The audit might still lead to difficult decisions. For that day, however, the people at North Plant knew their jobs would not disappear through a deal approved by someone secretly being paid to close it. Mother stood as the directors began gathering their papers. Her face had lost the controlled expression she had carried into the room. When she looked toward Hazel, it changed again. Pride replaced anger so quickly that it frightened me. She walked toward the adjoining room. "My sweet girl," she said, "do you understand what your special ability just did? You saved your great-grandfather's legacy." Hazel pressed deeper into her chair. I stepped between them before Mother could touch her or lift the phone already in her hand. "No pictures." Mother lowered the phone. "I only wanted one family photograph. You are not using her to repair what happened here. I am giving her credit. You are trying to stand beside the result after rejecting the child who noticed it." Hazel reached for my hand. We left the boardroom before Mother could turn her new praise into another claim of ownership. In the elevator, Hazel watched the numbers descend above the doors. "Did I save it?" she asked. "You noticed something important," I said. "Then people did the work they were supposed to do." She thought about that, then nodded. I did not tell her she had rescued hundreds of jobs or solved Grandpa's final mystery. She had remembered a broken sound. I had believed her. Nora, Daniel, and the board had followed the evidence. That was enough. The company still had an audit ahead of it. My parents still faced consequences that would take months to settle. I believed the hardest part was over. That evening, after Hazel had gone to bed, my phone lit up with a voicemail from Mother. Her voice was softer than it had been in the boardroom. "We can fix this as a family," she said. "We want you and Hazel to come home." I did not return my mother's voicemail. For the next few weeks, the independent audit moved forward without me. The North Plant sale was canceled, and my parents remained suspended from signing contracts or representing Vaughn Millwork. Their consulting agreement and the documents surrounding the proposed sale were turned over to outside counsel. Whatever civil consequences followed would take months, perhaps longer. The board appointed an interim chief operating officer who had no connection to our family. Nora asked whether I would consider holding an advisory seat during the transition, but I declined. I had helped make sure Grandpa's words were heard in their full context. That did not make the company mine to lead. My own life remained smaller and more immediate. Mark continued paying temporary child support under the court order. Hazel stayed on his health insurance, and he was required to share the uncovered costs of therapy and medical care. The court had not yet ruled on temporary spousal support, and our divorce was still moving slowly through property disclosures and negotiations. I was not suddenly secure or wealthy. I still checked my account before buying groceries, and I still postponed replacing the failing brakes on my car until the following paycheck. The difference was that one unexpected therapy bill no longer threatened our rent. A week after the board meeting, the interim manager asked whether the company could thank Hazel during an employee gathering. He promised there would be no media, and said many North Plant workers wanted her to know what her observation had meant to them. I told him I would ask her. Hazel listened while I explained, then shook her head. "Will they all look at me?" "Yes." "Will they clap?" "Probably." "I don't want that sound." I told the interim manager she would not attend. He accepted the answer without trying to persuade me. The employees sent a simple card instead. It contained no photograph request and no language about special gifts. Inside, dozens of people had signed their names beneath one sentence thanking Hazel for speaking when something did not sound right. She read the sentence once and placed the card in Grandpa's wooden box. My parents asked to meet me 2 days later. I chose a small conference room at the public library. It was neutral, quiet, and far enough from both their house and my apartment that no one could pretend the meeting itself was a return home. Mother arrived, carrying a leather folder. Dad carried the same controlled expression he had worn during the first board meeting, though his authority was gone now. They sat across from me and began by describing what could still be repaired. They would transfer my childhood home into my name. Vaughn Millwork would create a scholarship honoring Hazel's attention to detail. I could accept a permanent position in community relations, with benefits and a salary higher than what I earned at the school district. Mother also wanted the 4 of us to release a family statement. "It would show that we are healing privately," she said. "People have heard only the most painful version of what happened. It is the version that happened. People say things under stress that they do not truly mean." I waited for her to name the words. She did not mention the facility, the ultimatum, or the message telling me to come home alone. Dad opened the folder to a page describing the proposed scholarship. Hazel's future could be connected to a company that understands the value of her abilities. Her abilities. At my parents' table, Hazel had been a disruption they wanted removed. In the boardroom, she had become an asset they wanted attached to the family name. The label had changed, but the condition underneath it had not. I closed the folder. "Would you want her back if she had never recognized the forklift?" Mother's face tightened. "That is not a fair question. It is the only question that matters." Dad leaned forward. "What happened at dinner was separate from what happened at the company." "No, it wasn't. At dinner you decided she had no place in the family because her needs were inconvenient. After the recording, you decided she belonged because her memory became useful. We are trying to make amends, Mother said. You are trying to make an announcement. Her eyes filled, but she still did not apologize. How long do you intend to punish us? This is not punishment. It is a boundary. I pushed the folder back across the table. Hazel did not become your family the day she helped save the company. She was your family the night you told me to leave her behind. Neither of them answered. I told them the house, scholarship, job, and public reconciliation were not acceptable. Any future contact with Hazel would have to begin with a specific apology that did not blame stress, misunderstanding, or me. After that, change would have to be demonstrated over time, and Hazel would decide whether she wanted contact. For now, there would be none. Mother looked at me as though I had taken something that belonged to her. I finally understood that she had always believed access to Hazel was a family right, even when she refused Hazel the same right to belong. I stood and left them with the unsigned proposal. That evening, a message from Mark appeared on my phone. I saw the article. I'm proud of Hazel. Tell her she did something incredible. Months earlier, I might have searched those words for evidence that he regretted leaving. I no longer needed regret to turn him back into the father I had hoped he would be. I saved the message with the other communication relevant to our custody case and did not answer it. Hazel was helping me prepare dinner. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup because she liked the sound of the bread pressing against the pan more than the sharper noises of chopping vegetables. The overhead light remained off. The lamp beside the table cast a warm circle over 2 bowls. Her headphones rested beside her plate. Did Grandma and Grandpa ask about me? She asked. Yes. Do they like me now? I sat across from her. They like what you did for them. She moved her spoon slowly through the soup. Is that love? Loving someone means seeing them before they can do anything for you. It means they still belong when they are tired, frightened, loud, quiet, helpful, or unable to help at all. Hazel considered that answer. Did I save the company? You noticed something important. The lawyers, the board, and the people who kept the records did the rest. Her eyes dropped toward the wooden box on the counter. But you never had to save a company to deserve a home, I said. You never had to prove anything to deserve me. A delivery truck rattled through the alley below. Hazel pressed her hands over her ears and looked toward the bedroom. You can go, I told her. Your soup will still be here. She left the table for several minutes and returned wearing her headphones. She sat down and continued eating without apologizing. I did not praise her for coming back or ask her to remove them. There was nothing to explain, and no one whose comfort had to be protected from hers. Our table was smaller than the one in my parents' dining room. One leg still rested on folded cardboard. The food was simple, the apartment was rented, and the future remained uncertain. But there were no rules hidden inside our welcome. At our table, no chair had to be earned.